In this movie, we'll finish adding our decals. Now I zoom back out to my camera view, which is camera V2. If you don't have this project window open, you can just tap your spacebar to bring it up. Under the camera tab, I'm on camera V2. Now remember, when I'm working on my decals, I like to have a camera that's aligned with either sort of a front, side, or top view. So I'm going to type a -90, just as we did before, and I'll make my incline a 0. And sometimes I'll even change my camera lens, which is currently a 45mm, to some much longer lens to get rid of any sort of distortion that I might have going on. And then I'll zoom in, and what I'll do this time is I'm actually going to save myself a camera. So I'll just add a camera, and I'll just call that decal view, just like that. And I think I'll turn the lights down just a little bit. So I'm hitting my down arrow just to turn the lights down. Make that a little bit easier to see when I'm working. The lights that are set up were set up for kind of our hero angle, and they're a little bright when you're in this view. So we're going to add a decal to this front face bezel. I'll double click that bezel, and here I have my metallic paint. I'm going to go to the label tab, double click on label, and I just made up a fake company here with a generic logo. It's just called Gentech, so we'll choose the Gentech-logo PNG file. And because I have this blue, I can just click, and that's going to apply the center of my logo. Now again, the logo is much too large. Let me try a 0.2 and see what size that is. That looks a little bit large, so let's make that a 0.15. And it's moved off center, and I could drag this kind of anywhere in here. I just think this happens to be kind of a good location for it. And let's bring that intensity down just a little bit. There we go. I'll click done on that. And let's go back to that V2 camera. So as you see, that looks kind of nice on there. But one thing we haven't done yet is we haven't looked at our face bezel G3. So at the moment, if I switch that bezel off and switch this one on, you can see it's just the kind of default material. So what I'll do is I'm going to click on Fair Bez G1, and I'm going to right click and go to Material, Copy Material, and then I'll go to Face Bez G3, and I'll paste material. Now that's pasted that on there, and what's really nice is it remembers our decal location. So even if I had, as in the case of these buttons, these are all considered one material, so there's actually 4 decals applied to this. If I had another set of buttons and changed them and copied and pasted the material onto them, it would remember where all 4 of those button locations are. Now if I want to change this material, I do have to be a little bit careful. If I open up my material library, let's say I didn't like this silver look anymore, if I were to take any of my materials and just drag a material to here, it's going to lose that decal. It doesn't remember that. As of KeyShot 5, which will be out in a few months, it will remember that decal location. But from now, the way that you can change it is if you go to your color tab, and you have all of these color libraries, and for those of you familiar with the Pantone PMS colors, those are all represented. So let's say I want to change this to a 021. See if that's in there. Yep, and sure enough, here's an orange 021. So I can take this, and I can just drag this over. And it's a little odd because this is a metallic color, so it really is only applying it. Double click on this, you can see it's applying it there. So we're not getting a true sort of feedback. But if I click on this metal color, instead of just dragging this around, what I can actually do is click on this little eyedropper. And when I click on that, anywhere I drag this box on my entire computer screen, just not in KeyShot, and click, it'll sample those colors. So if I wanted to get this kind of an orange here, I could just click on that, and notice now it's changed that. So I would drag that a little bit. I might even make that a little more yellow. And the same with this. I think I'll bump up the hue just a little bit on that. But notice that it's remembered my decal location. So I'm able to change these colors and keep the decal location. If I switch that layer off, I can bring this one back, and they are separate. I'm able to always have those couple of different options. And I could even take this face bezel layer, and I can right click on it, and I can duplicate it. Turn this one off, and now I have 2 of these. Let me just change this to G1, make that G1B. Now if I wanted to change this, and let's say I want to make that a plastic now. Let's make that a nice and shiny plastic. I'll change the white under the specular. And now if I change the color of these, because this is no longer metallic, it's just changing the diffuse color, and it works really well. Say I wanted to go to one of these. And anytime you change your color, you can just Control Z to undo your changes. There's also a bunch of kind of basic lights, serene, traditionals. They've got the RAL color libraries, and there are some metallic libraries as well. Say I wanted an 8001, which is a fairly common color. There's premium metallics. There's all sorts of color libraries we can choose from. There's Kelvin lights. Say I wanted sort of a little paisley sort of a look to it. We can even do that. And notice it keeps that all the time. If I decide I don't want that, no problem. I can highlight that and hit delete, and it'll just delete that part. And then I'll just bring back my standard one. All right, so I'm going to go back into my decal view, and let's put a screen on this thing because that's really going to change how this looks. What I'll do is I'm going to double click on this, and let me just change the color of this just a little bit so it's easier for you to see what's going on. So remember in our model, we had this kind of a squircle shape that represents our lens. So I'm going to add a texture instead of a label to this. So I'm going to make this an emissive color, assuming that it's kind of backlit. And let's give it a brightness intensity of 2. So under texture, I'm going to double click texture. And let's go with LCD1 first here. Now, because it's a texture, there's a couple things I want to change. Textures are typically used to apply things that would tile. And you can see under our preview, it's kind of tiling it. So the first thing I need to do is turn off repeat. And now I'm going to change the size. Let's go to a 0.2. And I can click my mapping tool here. And because we're using a box map, it's a little different than what we were seeing previously. Now I can just kind of visually drag that around. If I want, instead of typing numbers, I can just drag this slider around until I get something that looks pretty good. I can hit OK on that once the size is good. And let's make that a 1.5 intensity. Go to my camera, go back to V2 and see how that looks. And that looks pretty good, but it's kind of an old tech sort of a decal. So let's go back into my material, go to textures, and I'm going to change this. So I'll just click on load new texture. This time I'm going to choose LCD-2. Let's make that a 0.2. Now we're getting something that's a lot more high tech. Let's turn that down to, let's say, a 1.2. Turn the performance mode back off. Because we used an emissive light instead of a decal, this thing is actually glowing just like a real part would do. No matter where, even if we go into the dark with it, it's still going to be showing just like a real backlit LCD would be showing. Bring this back, go to camera V2, and that's all of our decals applied. That concludes this look at adding decals.